Okay. This is an attempt to install everything from scratch. Well, mostly everything. For the computer, power source is already installed, motherboard is already installed, the DVD-ROM's already installed. That's just a simple slide in. We haven't installed the power or the cable that connects to the motherboard just yet. First thing we're going to do is install the CPU. Just before we install the CPU, I'm going to attempt to install the heat sink. There's a couple parts to it. The heat sink is going to connect through these 4 holes. You can see the cross X here, and that's where the heat sink is going to install. There's the little cross piece here, and that's going to fit into those holes there. The heat sink that we're going to use here, not sure what the name is, I've had it for a few years. I just stripped this real quick just to show a buddy of mine how to install it. This end piece is going to fit right where the CPU is, so it's going to be parallel to the edge of the box here. But before we install that, we're going to, well, first part of the installation of that piece, we're going to take these bolts here. They're going to not necessarily screw, but they're going to sit inside this little hole here. This will be 4 of them. On the opposite side is we're going to screw them into one place. Excuse me as I take this case and turn it about. Try to keep all the wires to themselves so that nothing is pulled. Alright, so back side here, get the wires out of the way. Those 4 holes are once again in the location of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the first thing you want to do is get your square little plate. This little plate is going to keep those screws in place. And then we're going to have some bolts to help keep everything in line. So we're going to take the original bolt here. We're just going to have a screw piece. I'm going to screw it into the opposite side, into one of the first holes here. As you can see, it comes right through that hole as planned. I'm going to actually put this phone down so that I can attempt to show you what's going on without stopping the video. This in itself is a trick. Okay, that should be nowhere sufficient enough. Okay, so I'm going to have to waste a lot of time on this part. That seems sufficient. Okay, so I'll keep my hand on the opposite side. Go ahead and put this plate where it needs to be. And to make sure it stays in its spot, go ahead and lightly screw on this bolt. And if you don't do it, as you put on the next bolt, the first one will likely fall off. Go ahead and screw this in. I would say as so, but we all have our own little difficulties. Come on. Go ahead and flip it to the opposite side. That could be the problem. And there we go. First one is on. The second one, same as the first. And for that first hole. And now you can back it out just a little so it gets in. Put a little pressure so that it actually, or a little play, so it gets through that bottom piece of the hole. You don't want it in the middle of the slot here. You want it actually at the very bottom. It's giving me a little hard time. Or more like I'm giving myself a difficult time here. Alright, that's fair enough. And once again, screw it in so you won't be playing with it too much. It won't fall out on you on the opposite side. It's not too tight. It's all in hand. The next one. And now you can go ahead and make sure it gets to the bottom piece of that hole. Attempt to. If it doesn't, that's fine. As long as all of them are screwed in. This is so that the screws stay into place without having to really put a lot of pressure on the motherboard itself. Go ahead and wiggle that bottom screw a little bit. Popped right in. And a little hand screw right in. Finally, the fourth piece. The last bottom hole. Make sure you go into the right one. Otherwise, it's completely useless. I'm putting a little pressure on here. A little play back and forth. There you go. Here it doesn't really want to give a lot, but that's alright. And it's not as tight as I'd like it to be. And go ahead. It looks pretty up against the motherboard as it is, so it's probably this square piece that's not all the way down, but it's not bad though. Everything else is on pretty well tight. That first one's not on as much as I would like it to be. I don't want to use the opposite side because I really don't want to dig into the motherboard and scratch it. So that's a little better. I was able to get a little more. That's satisfactory. I'm fine with that. If you really want to play with it, go for it, but it's not my prerogative at the moment. And now, on the opposite side, I'm going to go ahead and, excuse me as I bring this down. And so we can get a better look at the CPU here. Alright. If this was already latched, certainly going to latch it, bring it up, and grab the CPU here. CPU, if you look at it, I can get a better angle. One of these corners is actually going to have a triangle. It looks like my bottom thumb is kind of hiding it in this corner here. Let's see if I can get a better view on it. If I bring it down. Excuse once again. And so there you go. It's a little better. Trying to get it so it's a little easier to see. But you can see that there is something on this corner against my thumb. That will correlate to the four corners here. Three of the four corners will match. It'll be a square. The fourth in this corner here will be round, and that's where this CPU is going to lay. You really don't want to touch anything about the CPU. You just want to lay it right inside the socket to correspond. If you attempt to look a little closer, it's a little bright, so I'll get some of the light out of the way here without getting rid of all of it. It also correlates to the little notches on the side here and on the side here and here. So you got it all locked into place. Go ahead and take the latch here, bring it down. There's going to be a little slot that this little tab is going to slide into. Make sure it's into that slot, and go ahead and bring down the wire, and if you didn't see that again, bring it down. There is a good amount of pressure here actually, and it's going to go under that latch. So now the CPU is nicely fastened. We also have our full 4 bolts that we were talking about before, 2, 3, and 4. We're now going to install the heatsink, but before we do that, I'm going to add just a little bit of thermal grease. This helps get rid of any type of microscopic pockets between the CPU and the heat sink that could potentially keep the heat from dissipating into the heatsink, and it actually creates more heat between the two components. By adding this little bit, just a smidgen amount of grease to it, it fills those holes, and the heat can then transfer properly from the CPU to the heatsink and dissipate into the surrounding area. So the amount of goop is actually very limited, because as you press it on, it's been probably a year since I've used this. Should be just a little bit. Okay, there we go. It's coming out. So you really just want a little bit. There you go. That's fair enough. As you go ahead and press this down, that goop will spread all out, and you don't want it so much so that it actually gets on the outside of the CPU and onto the motherboard. Otherwise, there's a chance of doing some damage. That's probably why this little case is here as well, out far away, but that's just stipulation. Hate to talk for the engineers who ended up creating this. We can actually attempt to sit this right down if you'd like, and that's right down in the center, like so. So it's actually standing up by itself at the moment. Of course, we can't let it lay as such. Go ahead and slide the ring in here, the X-Fix, and I'm going to go ahead and open it right up. Doing this with one hand is not the easiest thing, nor is it the hardest thing in life, but it's not the easiest. I'm going to go ahead and just get one side screw down just a little bit so that's at least lining up to the opposite side. You have some tension, as you can see, just a little bit of tension, but that's because everything else isn't really lined up. For it to more properly fit, it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm really cutting light here, but let's see if we can get that in. Oh, so close, so close. Okay, so the two opposite ends are fitted in, and so now the other two shouldn't be nearly as bad. Nope, this one slides right in. And the opposite side. Before I do any type of actual press fitting with a screwdriver, I'm just going to attempt to use a screwdriver to give me a little more oomph and to get inside if it's a little too tight. I'm not pressing down. I'm just kind of, there we go, attempting to make sure it actually lines up and gets inside the hole, but now it's very easy to screw down. And the opposite side. You want this to be even all about. So if you, and so really, I should be able to, nah, too tight now. And the opposite side. And now I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom. Okay, that looks like that's pretty worn in. Come back to the opposite side. Bring that down. Okay, and that's pretty good. You'll notice it really tighten up, and you don't even have to really, you do not need to put too much force into it at all. Actually, no force. Just, if you can't spin it with two fingers, that's good. And we are screwing this into a motherboard and not into an actual engine block. So if there's a little give, that's fine. So there's the heat source, or heat sink, excuse me. Heat source is actually from the CPU, and we don't want that at all. And that's pretty much installed. That's the hard part. On the outside of the heat sink is going to be this fan. If this fan was already connected to this, then you should be able to just slide it right off. Here, you can actually just clip it right on, just like a hugging bear, and you can bring it down just a little bit to fit your needs. You have it on either side. I prefer to have it so that the case is blowing in, blows right into here, but this is naturally blowing to the opposite end. That's the way I had it set up. Nothing too special about it. If you want to do it the other way, by all means. And then for this fan here, you got this wire. This wire is actually going to come down to this outside one. It says CPU op. There's actually another one on the outside. These two are, from what I can tell, let's see if I can give you some light here. These two here are going to be the same type of voltage. I'm just going to use this wire from this CPU on the outside here, and then I'm going to use this fan right here for this wire, which is this one at the side here, into the opposite side, just to keep things simple. You can see the, I'm trying to see if I'm going to see the four-prong, excuse me, entrance, and you can see that you got this little ledge here. This little ledge is going to fit, this little ledge is going to actually point towards the roof, and actually it might be a little easier if I take this off first, give myself a little room. I'm going to go ahead and just unhook it, and then see if I can just slide it right in. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to do it in the smaller spot. Once again, there's a little edge here. It's going to face towards the roof or the top. Excuse me if the video is not in the proper viewing section. I'm just trying to slide it in myself with the limited light that I do have, which is very insufficient. Let's see if I can bring the light on the opposite side here. Alright, let's try this again. It's a little better. This one only has 3, but it should still be in the top 3. So I'm actually going to use, even though there's 4 slots, I'm still going to try to get that notch inside that other notch. Excuse me if the video is absolutely horrendous. There we go. So as you can attempt to see, you may not be able to see it because it's just so fine in the darkness as well. You can see it's plugged in, but right on the outside, that little right there is the 4th out of the 3 that this fan is going to be using. And once again, for the fan that's going to be connecting to the power, the heatsink, I'm going to plug in now the opposite side. So you can watch me struggle to do that, but this one should be a little easier. Oh yeah, much easier. Slid right in, and now I'm going to turn this around, have the wires point straight up, because I don't want the wires to be into the motherboard. This should just hug right in. Check both sides. Looks pretty good. Bring this back up, and there we go. Voila. The wire here, I have it looped right between, so it's not in this fan. At the same time, you want to make sure it's not going to be in this fan either. Same thing with the loop. I just have it looped here. This is the original the original string that came with it. Just keep it out of the harm's way. Fair enough. There's actually another fan here. This fan connects into right here. There's another 4-prong, and once again, you see the little ledge there. The other side's nice and smooth. Also, you can see the little through prongs. This is going to fit right into those 3 right there, and that was a little bit easier. And as you can see, I still have the original tie band, and just see if you can slide that out of harm's way. You want to make sure you have enough room here so it doesn't pull out, but I like to keep them off to the side. That's one last thing I have to worry about. So now that's how you install the heatsink. That took much longer than it needs to, but I'm also explaining and doing this one-handed. The next part will be the RAM. It's pretty darn simple. You have the little notch there, that little notch, compared to that long stretch, it's going to correspond. I'm going to use the two outside. To me, it doesn't really matter. You can use in between. I'm not sure if that's going to be sufficient enough, significant enough in any type of CPU difference, but seeing as how I have enough power anyway, I do not care. Make sure the two latches here are up as you install it, and then as you press down, it should naturally come closed. And make sure both sides are down. You want to press down first so you get evenness, but sometimes one side presses over the other. And I'll do that for the second one. From what I've read, you really do want to keep the two outside, the two inside together. I have tried it, so there's like a space in between. I haven't noticed a difference, but you know, it's what I've heard, just better this way. But again, that's hearsay. It's what it's what I've done. Nothing significant. So there's that. So now I got the RAM CPU with the heatsink. At which point there's still a bunch of these wires, so I'm going to wait until the very end. I'm now going to install my video card. The video card is going to actually, it's very thick. It's extremely thick. It's going to actually take up 2 slots here. You can tell by actually looking at the very end here, 2 slots. Simple enough. Go ahead and take the 2 slots off. Make sure the 2 slots correspond to the size of the slot. The size will be this one right here. Through experience, I forgot what this slot is called. For the most part, I don't care. Just look at each slot if you need to, compared to the actual slots, and whichever one matches up. That's the safest bet. I mean, you really don't need it. It's so simplified. You don't even need to know the names. There's nothing special. Go ahead and bring this down, and I'm doing this very bad, and all these components shouldn't be touching each other, but oh well. Great thing is they know that the average person probably would be playing with this, and so the engineers are kind enough to go, all right, let's try to make this idiot-proof. So, and let's make sure it still works. So as you install it, of course, this piece has to come down. I'm trying to install it in this back piece, and make sure when you do install it, it's up and down, straight up and down. Actually, it might be easier if you look on the opposite side so you can actually see it. This, the very edge here needs to be up, flat, up against, and you can see it should slide down nice and easy. Everything should line right up. The 2 holes line right up. Go ahead and take your screws wherever I decide to put them. These 2 random ones at the side here look good enough. And you may have to bring this up, push this up a little so that the screws will actually fit. But that means you might have pulled it out of the socket slightly after we install the screws here. I'm going to go ahead and press it back down just a little bit just to make sure it's... Oh, come on. Yeah, it definitely came out of the slot there. If I was doing this with 2 hands, I would have made this so much quicker. So, now that I have the first one installed, go ahead and grab the next one. Have that installed. Okay. Okay. And that one's installed. With this, and then go ahead and press it back down. Make sure it's actually in its slot and not on the outside. You don't want it on the way outside or wherever it is. It should just be a simple press down. You're good to go. So that's the video card. There is, as we do the power part, there is an extra part that needs to be an extra power source that needs to be connected in here. The power source from the motherboard is no longer sufficient. If you do not plug it in and you just turn it on, good chance when you go to actually plug it in and see the visual on the screen, it'll ask you, hey, we know that this type of video card is installed. Why? Because it's actually reading through it, but not enough power is being supplied. Please plug it in. Why? Because I've actually done it before. And then from there, Actually, most of the other components are already installed, so... Oh, the hard drives, actually. Hard drives, very basic. There's the two types that you need here. Alright. The first is a SSD, very basic. Don't mind my mess here. You can only obviously see what I can produce to you, but it's sufficient enough. Two small little screws. They're going to correspond to... Actually, you really need to have four, but somehow I have gone missing one or two. I ended up finding one earlier. I'm not sure if that'll work or not, but I can certainly try it. So, the SSD will connect into the slot here. There's 4 holes, only 2 screws, oh well. And so this is going to be fun. Excuse me as I have a delay. I'm going to go ahead and quickly screw this in. The quicker I do that, the less downtime you'll have. I'll try to make this as quick as I can. I'm not sure why I decided to unscrew this part. Anyone can screw it in. But seeing as I'm not going to remake this video, you're just going to have to bear with me. That's one of 2. Looks pretty good. And rounding up on such bad views. Okay. Alright, so now once again, here are the 2 screws. You really should have 4, the opposite side, but whatever. And then here's a regular video card, hard drive video card. Go ahead and take it, flip it over, and these screws will line up with these screws here. And so the ones you'll be using are much bigger. Go ahead and line them up. And so you can see right through where it needs to be screwed in, where the threading is. And it's pretty basic. Anybody can do this part. Actually, anybody can really do any of it, but you just have to have the patience to do it. Try not to do what I just did and touch that. Will it really bomb it? No, but if there's anything on your hands, your hand should be clean anyway. But just in case if there is anything while you're starting to work with it, you really don't want it to be on there, because as you make the connection, now you're going to have something between the copper there and the copper or whatever is inside the cable